African Thunderstorm is our next poem. A lot of this may seem as repetition because I will do the line by, I say the line by line, but stanza per stanza. And then fortunately in the slideshow at the end of each stanza, there is a short little summary. So just to give you some background, David Rubadiri was born in Malawi. And he was also an ambassador for Malawi at some stage. And he fled to Uganda. Then Idi Amin became the dictator there. And he came back to, well, then he went to Kenya. And yeah, he was actually even a member of the United Nations, and he used quite a lot of his writing, or used quite a lot of dark humor, black humor, in his writing. So if we're going to go and have a look at the context of this poem, and we will also touch this in the theme, where the literal meaning could be literally a thunderstorm within Africa, which is probably one of the most amazing sounds and most amazing things to experience. Or it could be the metaphorical one, where we look at the negative effects of colonialization. When the British and the Dutch came in, they took over Africa, the destructive impact they had, the European people, that it had on the people in Africa. And yeah, remember when they started, the European and the British people saw that Africa's got minerals and lots of wealth. They wanted to come and take over, and they forced native tribes into their own little sectors and started with slavery, and they just did it for their own good. Yep, that is a thunderstorm. I'm going to try and read the poem over the thunderstorm for you. From the west, clouds come hurrying, with the wind turning sharply here and there, like a plague of locusts whirling, tossing up things on its tail, like a madman chasing nothing. Pregnant clouds ride stately on its back, gathering to perch on hills like sinister dark winds. The wind whistles by, and trees bend to let it pass. In the village, screams of delighted children toss and turn in the din of the whirling wind. Women, babies clinging on their backs, dart about in and out madly. The wind whistles by whilst the trees bend to let it pass. Clothes wave like tattered flags, flying off to expose dangling breasts, as jagged, blinding flashes rumble, tremble, and crack amidst the smell of fired smoke and the pelting march of the storm. I'm going to go through all of the, or just let every note come onto the screen first before we start. So as I said to you, literally, we are looking at a thunderstorm. It is as simple as that. If you look at the literal interpretation of it, it is probably one of the easiest poems ever. However, when they ask this in an exam, they are not going to just ask you the literal. They're definitely going to ask you the metaphorical meaning, the figurative meaning of it as well. And you are going to have to compare the two with each other. So from the west, clouds come hurrying with the wind, obviously rain clouds, or in this case, the metaphor, the British colonialists, turning sharply here and there. In other words, they're very in their harmful path of destruction, and they're very unpredictable. It's almost like a plague. And remember, plague of locusts strips Africa of everything, or strips a piece of land of absolutely everything. You can see the whirling, tossing up things on its tail like a madman chasing nothing, where it goes on and it tells us, it's a simile, tells us about the frightening unpredictability of the coming storm, but also the frightening unpredictability of what the people are going to do as soon as the Westerners take over, and the influence they're going to have on everything. So yeah, you can go through the summary as such. Stanza 1. Stanza 2. Pregnant clouds riding stately on the back, gathering to perch on the hills like sinister dark winds, and the wind whistles by and trees bend to let it pass. Again, in this case, if you look at the literal, pregnant clouds being massive big clouds, but it's also the personification of the clouds. And also, if you look at the personification of it, the inevitable multiplication of the outsiders, the colonialists, the British, etc. And they ride stately on their back, almost like royalty, gathering to perch on hills like sinister dark winds. Sinister is a very ominous word, and yeah, again, he uses a simile where it's like birds of prey that are where the clouds are being compared to birds of prey waiting, ready to attack, and the wind whistles by. Now, the wind that whistles by is just the soothing British colonialist influence. It just comes by, and the trees, what do the trees do? What do the people do? They just give way to this progress. They allow all of these things to take place. They allow for the influx of foreigners into their country, into their continent. Stanza 3 says, in the village, now we're going to look in the first section, we looked at the effect or what the storm does. And now later on, we're looking at the effect of the storm, where it reaches a climax, and the images of chaos and destruction that it has on humans. And not just a storm in itself, because that we can see physically, but also the fact what the colonialization had on Africa. And in the village, screams of delighted children. Normally, screams of delighted children is sense of innocence. However, in this case, it's there's no longer this calmness, because now we go over, and it's this heavy contrast between the children. They're running in and out of the wind, Westerners exposing children to some negative things, the influence of them. And then we have the mothers. The mothers have their babies clinging on their backs, and babies is a sense of innocence, but again, also realization of truth. So now they're no longer talking about the children, they're talking about babies. And babies being, again, a sense of innocence. And the women, the mothers, they dart about in and out madly. The wind whistles by whilst trees bend to let it pass. The contrast between what the children go through and what the mothers go through. The children are running in and out, and the mothers are frantically going about, making sure, getting their children in closer into the house. However, the security of homes with the figurative meaning has now started diminishing, and it creates fear. And again, the wind whistles by whilst trees bend to let it pass. Again, strong African people giving away to progress. Stanza 3, children with no cares, playing. They couldn't be bothered. But we will also see, I'm going to go back to one slide where he repeated lines 18 and 19. It's a repetition emphasizing the growth or the intensity of the storm, but also the influx of the Westerners. And he shows, Rubadiri shows his frustration through this, questioning the reason why Africans are allowing these things to happen. Now we go with the clothes that wave like tattered flags. Remember, a flag is a nation. It's got very strong nationalistic connotation. You raise your flag for your country. The American people set an amazing example where outside every single house you will find an American flag, showing togetherness. And but the clothes are flying off. clothes also, remember, clothes is very much an African tradition of unity. When we look at people who when we look at African people, they wear these traditional outfits, and now suddenly even that's going out of the way, you know. And it's flying off, exposing dangling breasts. Yes, literally, but figuratively, it's the most intimate parts. The weaknesses are also being exposed. The very root of Africans are being exposed as jagged, blinding flashes rumble, tremble, and crack, which is this quick, swift movement of, you can say, where they're being caught off guard, and gunshots, and the figurative, the literal, obviously the lightning that strikes, and the rumble, tremble, and crack, which just creates these harsh sounds, creating absolute cacophony amidst the smell of fired smoke. So was this offensive? Notice there the metaphor again. The smell of fired smoke, where these people are moving around. When lightning strikes in a felt, I think the first thing a farmer thinks is, oh, flip, what's happening to my vegetation? And nothing of that is good. None of us want to experience a burn, a house burn, or a fire or anything. And the pelting march of the storm. Personification, the organized way in which these people are being influenced. Now, notice there's also a lot of repetition within the poem, emphasizing the power of the wind and the powerlessness of everything that's actually in its wake, whether it is power, whether it's what the people are, who the people are, etc. In the first, it starts off and it echoes the energy of the storm, and the tone is very ominous, as if knowing that something bad is going to happen. And we know that because of words like plague, madman, dark, sinister, madly, jagged, blinding. And then those shorter lines here towards the end picks it up into a climax of the storm, again creating a mood of absolute chaos and devastation, and just exposing the very roots of African people. So I'm going to add here at a file from the XKit book where there are questions. Again, I'm not going to expect of you to answer the essay question, because that would be something that I will give to you as a memo for practice purposes. But yeah, I hope this helps quite a lot, and that you can read through all of these additional notes. Again, just the organized way in which the colonialists came in and they took over in Africa. And that's it, kiddo.